Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to turn your post notifications so you don't miss any of our new videos. And now let's get right into it. Here is the beginning of a story based on the prompt. Chapter 1. The alarm blared mercilessly, dragging Sarah from her fitful sleep. With a groan, she slapped the off button and rolled onto her back, staring blankly at the ceiling. Another day, another series of meetings, deadlines, and responsibilities bearing down. At least with her job, she knew where she stood. Her work as a marketing director for a large tech company had always been steady, reliable. It never let her down or broke her heart. The same couldn't be said for her lengthy string of failed relationships. Sliding out of bed, Sarah pushed thoughts of her love life, or lack thereof, from her mind. A hot shower and strong coffee would help wake her up and get her focused on the tasks ahead. As the steam filled the bathroom, she replayed the familiar mantra. Her job was all she needed. Men were too much drama. An hour later, dressed and ready to face the day, Sarah was immersed in reports at her desk when a knock sounded at her open office door. Looking up, she froze at the figure leaning casually against the frame. Jackson Cole, CEO of her company, stood watching her with an annoyingly charming half-smile. "Got a minute, Martin? I'd like your thoughts on the Thompson proposal." His voice was deep and smooth, carrying an effortless confidence. Sarah fought back an eye roll. Of course, he wanted her thoughts. He always seemed to find reasons to interrupt her workflow, testing her resolve with his movie star good looks. Well, it wasn't going to work. She had no intention of falling for his act, or so she told herself. Sarah gestured for Jackson to enter, though she made a show of sorting through papers as if busy. "I've reviewed the Thompson proposal, and while their concepts have potential, I don't think their pricing structure or production timeline will work for us." Jackson nodded slowly, leaning back against her desk as he listened. Sarah fought to keep her eyes focused on the pages in front of her, rather than tracing the lines of his muscular frame underneath his clothes. "I was worried about those same issues," he replied. "Any suggestions on how we can get what we need at a better value?" Sarah launched into her analysis, outlining alternative vendors and strategies to achieve their goals more efficiently. As she spoke, Jackson watched her with an intrigued gaze that made her all too aware of his handsome face mere inches from her own. She finished with a pointed look, hoping he'd take the hint and leave her be. Instead, he smiled crookedly. "Excellent insight as always, Sarah. I knew I could count on you." His voice caressed her name in a way that sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. Forcing nonchalance, she waved a dismissive hand. "It's my job to analyze these deals and advise you. No need to thank me." Jackson leaned in even closer, his breath warm against her cheek. "Oh, I'll be sure to thank you properly later. Dinner tonight? We can discuss further opportunities." Sarah's resolve trembled under the heat of his nearness and the tempting offer. But she had sworn off falling for smooth-talking charmers, no matter how attractive. This time would be different. She had to remain focused on her work, not risky distractions. Even if Jackson Cole looked at her in a way no man ever had before, Sarah knew she should refuse Jackson's dinner invitation. Yet something in his bright blue eyes, gazing at her so intensely, weakened her determination. "I really shouldn't," she said, though it came out less certain than intended. "There's still so much to do here." Jackson straightened, putting a polite distance between them once more. but the heat of his stare lingered on her skin. One dinner, as colleagues, to further strategize. I'll even spring for takeout here so you don't lose any time. He flashed a rakish grin. Consider it a working meal. Blast the man for knowing just how to counter her objections. A working dinner in her office posed no real risks, did it? And she couldn't deny her own curiosity about Jackson Cole beneath his polished professional veneer. Fine, one dinner to discuss business, Sarah replied in what she hoped was an unaffected tone. But I make no promises about anything else. Jackson's smile grew, a glint of triumph in his eyes. I wouldn't dream of it. Chinese food in an hour work for you. At her nod, he turned to leave with an arrogant swoop of his broad shoulders, but not before throwing over one last parting phrase that made her pulse quicken despite herself. It's a date, Martin. Plan to be thoroughly wooed. As the door closed behind him, Sarah sank into her chair with a sigh. What had she gotten herself into with the enigmatic Jackson Cole? She was sure of only one thing. Resisting his appeal would prove the toughest challenge yet. True to his word, Jackson arrived precisely 1 hour later, carrying steaming cartons of Chinese food. Sarah's traitorous stomach rumbled at the mouth-watering scents as he set it all out on her desk. Hope you like everything I ordered, he said, flashing that devilish grin. I may have gone a bit overboard. It all smells great. Thanks. Sarah tried to ignore the shiver his nearness provoked once more. She busied herself dishing out food, keeping her eyes down. So, shall we get to business first, before digging in? Jackson settled into the chair across from her. Close, but not quite touching. His casual yet elegant attire hinted at expensive tastes outside the office. By all means, business first, then we eat. He leaned forward, bracing muscular forearms on his thighs as he studied her intently. What other proposals have you been reviewing that show promise? Sarah launched into analysis of a few other vendor options, outlining their strengths and weaknesses compared to the competition. As always, Jackson listened keenly, interjecting thoughtful questions that showed his keen, analytical mind. Before she knew it, they had mapped out altered timelines and partnerships to achieve their annual goals. Well done, as usual, Sarah, Jackson said, with quiet approval. She found herself preening slightly under his praise, like a bird fluttering its feathers. Troubling, to say the least. Clearing her throat, Sarah gestured to the now warm food. Well, with business completed, we may as well enjoy this feast you ordered before it gets cold. Jackson flashed a smile that held far more heat than it should. Yes, on to the far more enjoyable part of the evening. They dug into the meal, conversing lightly about work topics at first. But as the food began disappearing and tension built between them, the dialogue turned more personal. So, what made you decide to come work for my company? Jackson asked, gaze intent on Sarah from across the desk. She shrugged, not wanting to reveal too much of herself. The opportunity seemed like a smart career move. You have an excellent reputation, and I admired your vision. Her standard practiced answer, but Jackson seemed unconvinced. Leaning back, he swirled his wine glass contemplatively. I've read your file, Sarah. Top of your class in grad school, multiple promotions in just a few short years. You're remarkably ambitious and talented for someone so young. There has to be more to the story than that. Sarah squirmed, unaccustomed to such pointed interest in her past. Most men were put off or distracted by details of her career drive, but Jackson appeared genuinely curious to understand her. Maybe it was the wine, or the intimacy of sharing a private meal just feet from him, but the dam broke, and words tumbled out before she could stop them. The truth is, my last relationship ended badly. He didn't like that my job was just as important to me as being with him. Said I cared more about success than building a family. Her laugh was bitter. Joke's on him. My work is all I have now. When she dared meet his eyes again, they were soft with empathy. Reaching across the narrow space between them, Jackson clasped her hand in a surprisingly comforting grip. I'm sorry you went through that, but for what it's worth, I admire a woman who lives life on her own terms. His thumb stroked gently over her skin, sending a shiver up her arm. You deserve someone who appreciates you fully, career and all. Sarah's breath caught at the raw emotion in Jackson's gaze and the tender motion of his thumb. She glanced down at their joined hands, conflicted. This felt too intimate, yet pulling away seemed impossible. When she said nothing, Jackson loosened his hold, but didn't let go completely. Forgive me if I'm overstepping. It's just, ever since I first met you, I've been drawn to your passion and drive. Your ex was a fool. His praise stirred unfamiliar flutters in her stomach. Sarah wanted so badly to believe someone could accept all of her, scars and ambitions alike. But past wounds ran deep. Don't mistake gratitude for anything more, she warned, though her resolve sounded feeble, even to her own ears. I've learned the hard way that relationships only ever end up disappointing. Jackson lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles that left them tingling. When he spoke, his voice had lowered to a smoldering growl. You strike me as too vibrant a woman to live half a life, afraid of feeling fully. Let me prove I'm not like those others who failed you. His eyes drank her in with such heat and promise that Sarah's last defenses crumbled. Leaning across the desk, she met his kiss with a hunger that surprised them both. What had begun as a cordial work dinner was spiraling into something far more profound. Only time would tell if this was the start of something real. But in Jackson's embrace, Sarah felt truly seen and wanted for the first time in ages. Perhaps it was worth opening her heart just a little to find out. Their kiss quickly grew hungry and desperate, as if making up for lost time. Sarah clung to Jackson's solid shoulders, surprised by her own heated response, but unable to pull away. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Jackson ghosted his lips along her jaw, murmuring huskily in her ear, "Stay with me tonight. Let me show you what it's really like to be cared for." Every cautious instinct screamed to refuse, yet her body sang for his touch. Before she could overthink it, Sarah whispered, "Yes." A roguish grin split Jackson's face, and he took her hand to lead her from the office. But not before Sarah paused to lock up carefully. Her reputation and career depended entirely on discretion. At his nearby apartment, Jackson lit candles that bathed the space in a romantic glow. Soft music played as he poured her a glass of wine with steady hands, a gentleman to his core. Their earlier passion flared again, with lingering kisses on the couch, learning each other's tastes and textures. When they migrated to the bedroom at last, Jackson took his time lavishing Sarah with thorough attention. Each caress and whisper of devotion peeled away another layer of her guarded heart. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to fully feel and be felt in return, losing herself in reciprocating pleasure. In the quiet after, as they caught their breath, Jackson gazed at Sarah like she hung the stars. "Stay with me," he murmured once more, and to her shock, she heard her own voice agree without hesitation. As Sarah lay curled in Jackson's warm embrace, drifting on the edges of sleep, her earlier doubts began to creep back in. This was all happening so fast between them. Just an ordinary work night turned extraordinary, in a way she never could have predicted or controlled. She cared for Jackson. That much was undeniable after their passionate intimacy. But opening her heart again, after being hurt so deeply in the past, was a terrifying prospect. Sarah had built walls for a reason, to survive in her male-dominated industry without distractions. Now those barriers were crumbling, and it left her feeling raw and vulnerable. Did she truly know Jackson beyond surface charms and magnetic chemistry? What would things become in the harsh light of morning when real life resumed? Could he accept all of her, driven career woman and all? These wary thoughts swirled as Sarah watched Jackson sleep, etched in moonlight. As much as she wanted to believe this could be the start of something real and lasting, experience warned her that fairy tales seldom came true. Carefully extracting herself from Jackson's embrace so as not to wake him, Sarah dressed in the dark. A note was left explaining with regret that she couldn't stay, needing time and space to think clearly about such a monumental change. With a whispered goodbye and final glance at his peaceful form, Sarah slipped from the apartment, and her growing feelings in turmoil. Only time would reveal if following her heart was the right choice or a recipe for yet more pain. The next morning, Jackson awoke confused by the empty space beside him. Finding Sarah's note only increased his bewilderment and concern. He understood her need for space, but didn't want to lose what they had started before it fully began. At the office, Jackson caught Sarah in the break room and gently asked to talk. She seemed torn, opening up about her fears. Jackson listened without judgment, then shared his own feelings, how she challenged and inspired him in a way no other ever had. He didn't need quick answers, just a chance. Jackson asked her to dinner one more time, just to talk through things. After a long debate, Sarah agreed. Over a candlelit meal, much like their first, they took turns opening up about past hurts, while also envisioning a future together, step by careful step. In the weeks that followed, their relationship grew steadily through intimate conversations, trust-building acts of service, respect for boundaries, and, of course, mind-blowing chemistry. Soon, Sarah's walls were gone, replaced by the safest harbor in Jackson's love and understanding. Years later, at their wedding, Sarah glowed as she spoke of the challenges they'd overcome. Now she knew without doubt. Jackson respected all she was, in and out of the bedroom, and was there to stay through whatever life brought. Hard as it was to take the leap, following her heart to new love had been worth the risk.